I was sitting in the waiting room of St. Mary's Medical Center when I heard my daughter's voice through the partially open door of the consultation room. The words that drifted into the sterile corridor made my blood run cold, despite the fever that had brought me here for pre-operative testing. Once Dad's surgery is over and he doesn't survive, the $28 million medical equipment business is ours. Rebecca's voice carried that clinical detachment she'd perfected during her years as hospital administrator. The surgical complications we've documented will make everything look natural. My hand froze on the admission forms I'd been completing. Through the 3-inch gap in the door, I could see my daughter leaning against the examination table. Her phone pressed to her ear, completely unaware that her father sat 15 feet away, about to undergo the surgery she was discussing like a business transaction. Michael's already reviewed the surgical protocols, she continued, and I realized she was talking to my son-in-law, the man I'd mentored through medical school, who now served as chief surgeon at this very hospital. A few minor adjustments to the anesthesia monitoring, some delays in post-operative care if complications arise. Nothing that would raise red flags, but enough to ensure the outcome we need. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening from in the comments. The clipboard slipped from my numb fingers, clattering against the linoleum floor. A nurse rushed over, concerned about my pallor, but I waved her away, mumbling something about pre-surgery nerves. How could I explain that I'd just discovered my daughter and son-in-law were planning my death to inherit the medical supply empire I'd built over 40 years? The timeline is perfect, Rebecca was saying. His surgery is scheduled for Thursday. By Friday afternoon, we'll be planning a funeral and filing insurance claims. Hartford Medical Supplies will need new leadership immediately, and as the only family members with healthcare experience, the board will naturally turn to us. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands, activating the recording app just as Rebecca continued her cold dissertation on my planned demise. The waiting room's fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, the antiseptic smell too sharp. Everything I'd taken for granted, my daughter's concern about my health, Michael's insistence on personally handling my surgery, took on sinister new meaning. The beautiful part is he trusts us completely, Rebecca said, and I heard her laugh, a sound that once brought me joy at family dinners. He even updated his will last month to ensure the business stays in the family. He has no idea we've been documenting his declining mental capacity for the past year. A year. They'd been planning this for a year, while I'd been proudly telling anyone who'd listen how lucky I was to have such devoted children. The irony made me want to vomit right there in the waiting room. I have to go, Rebecca said suddenly. Preoperative consultation in 5 minutes. Remember, Michael, no deviation from what we discussed. This has to look completely natural. The door opened fully, and my daughter emerged, her hospital administrator badge gleaming against her pristine white coat. She walked past me without a glance, her heels clicking efficiently against the floor, completely unaware that her father had just heard every word of her murderous plan. I sat frozen for another 10 minutes, my mind reeling. The surgery scheduled for Thursday, a supposedly routine gallbladder removal that Michael had insisted required his personal attention, was apparently meant to be my last day on Earth. The man I'd walked down the aisle with Rebecca 8 years ago was planning to murder me on an operating table. Standing on unsteady legs, I made my way to the parking garage. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel of my Mercedes. The drive home took 30 minutes, but I remember none of it. My mind was stuck on repeat, playing Rebecca's words over and over. Once Dad's surgery is over and he doesn't survive. The house felt different when I walked through the door. Martha, my housekeeper of 15 years, asked if I was feeling all right, noting I was home early from my pre-operative appointment. I managed to tell her I was fine, just needed rest before the surgery. The lie came out smoothly, though inside I was screaming, In my study, I locked the door and played the recording again. 17 minutes of my daughter plotting my murder with the casual efficiency she brought to hospital administration. Every word was clear, damning, undeniable. But what could I do? Cancel the surgery and they'd know I was onto them. Go through with it and I'd likely die on the table. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Thomas Brennan, my lawyer for 25 years, and the only person I trusted outside my apparently homicidal family. "Tom, I need to see you immediately," I said when he answered, "and I need you to recommend a doctor who doesn't work at St. Mary's." "Robert, what's wrong?" "You sound terrible." "I can't explain over the phone." "Can you meet me at your office in an hour?" The drive to Tom's downtown office gave me time to think strategically. 40 years of building Hartford Medical Supplies from a single delivery van into a $28 million enterprise had taught me to approach problems methodically. This was just another hostile takeover attempt, albeit one with unusually personal stakes. Tom's face went pale as he listened to the recording. He set down his coffee cup with shaking hands, his usual professional composure cracking. "Robert, we need to contact the police immediately." "Not yet," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "First, I need to know exactly what they've been planning. You mentioned documenting my declining mental capacity. I need to know what evidence they've manufactured." Tom's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up medical records, board meeting minutes, and financial documents. What we found over the next 2 hours painted a picture of systematic deception that took my breath away. Rebecca had been filing reports with the board of directors for 14 months, documenting supposed memory lapses, confusion during meetings, and erratic decision-making that existed only in her imagination. Michael had contributed medical opinions suggesting early-stage dementia, complete with falsified test results. "They've been building a case for involuntary commitment," Tom said quietly. "If the surgery had failed, they would have been perfectly positioned to take control. If you'd survived but been incapacitated, they could have claimed power of attorney based on these medical assessments." The scope of their betrayal was staggering. Every concerned conversation about my health, every suggestion that I slow down and let them handle more of the business, it had all been positioning for this moment. "There's more," Tom said, pulling up financial records. 3 months ago, Rebecca opened a joint account with Michael at First National. They've been transferring funds from hospital procurement contracts, small amounts that wouldn't trigger audits. Current balance is $847,000. They'd been stealing from me while planning my murder. The violation felt almost quaint compared to the assassination plot. "What do you want to do?" Tom asked. "I want to bury them," I said, feeling a cold clarity settle over me. "But first, I need to survive Thursday." We spent the next 3 hours constructing a plan. Tom contacted Dr. James Morrison at Presbyterian General, explaining the situation in careful terms. James agreed to review my medical files and perform an independent evaluation, confirming what I already knew. I was in perfect health for a 68-year-old man, with no signs of dementia or mental decline. By evening, I was home, pretending everything was normal. Rebecca called to confirm Thursday's surgery schedule, her voice warm with false concern. "How are you feeling, Dad?" "Any anxiety about the procedure?" "Some nervousness," I admitted truthfully, "but I trust Michael completely." "You're in the best hands possible," she assured me. "Michael's cleared his entire morning for your surgery. He wants everything to be perfect. Perfect." The word made my skin crawl. That night, I updated my will with Tom's help, adding specific clauses that would become relevant very soon. I also installed hidden cameras in my study and living room, small devices that would capture any incriminating conversations over the next few days. Wednesday arrived with spring rain that matched my mood. I drove to St. Mary's for my final pre-operative consultation, playing the part of the trusting patient while my phone recorded everything. Michael greeted me with his practiced surgeon's smile, all professional warmth and competence. At 38, he looked every inch the successful doctor. Designer scrubs, precisely groomed beard, hands that had saved hundreds of lives and were now planning to end mine. "How's my favorite patient?" he asked, clasping my shoulder with false affection. "Nervous," I admitted. "It's silly at my age, but hospitals still make me anxious." "Completely normal," he assured me. "Tomorrow will be smooth sailing. Routine gallbladder removal. You'll be home by evening, probably cursing hospital food and demanding Martha's pot roast." We discussed the procedure for 20 minutes, Michael explaining every detail with the patience of a good doctor and the calculation of a murderer. He mentioned the anesthesia protocol twice, emphasizing how carefully it would be monitored. I thought about Rebecca's recorded words. "A few minor adjustments to the anesthesia monitoring." "I've reviewed all your scans personally," Michael continued, pulling up images on his computer. "Everything looks straightforward, though at your age, we always have to be prepared for unexpected complications." "What kind of complications?" "Oh, nothing specific. But surgery is never without risks. Heart events, unexpected bleeding, adverse reactions to medication. That's why I wanted to handle this personally. If anything unexpected happens, you'll have the best possible care." The best possible care from the man planning to kill me. The irony was almost poetic. I left his office with promises to see him bright and early tomorrow, knowing I'd never set foot in that operating room. But Michael and Rebecca didn't need to know that yet. That evening, Rebecca invited herself over for dinner, claiming she wanted to keep me company before the surgery. She arrived with groceries and cooked my favorite meal, rosemary chicken with roasted vegetables, while chattering about hospital politics and upcoming board meetings. "The board's been asking about succession planning," she mentioned casually while chopping carrots. "I told them you're far too vital to even discuss it, but they're insistent we have contingencies in place." "Probably wise," I agreed, watching her carefully. "What kind of contingencies?" "Oh, the usual. If something were to happen to you, they'd want family leadership to maintain stability." I told them that between Michael's medical knowledge and my administrative experience, we could handle things temporarily until a proper search could be conducted. Temporarily. We both knew there would be nothing temporary about it. "That sounds sensible," I said, "though I'm planning to be around for quite a while yet." She smiled. That same smile she'd given me when she was 7 and had broken my favorite coffee mug. "Of course, Dad." "We're just being cautious. The board worries too much." After dinner, she hugged me longer than usual, telling me she'd see me at the hospital in the morning. I hugged her back, memorizing the moment when I still had a daughter, even if she was planning my death. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, reviewing everything Tom and I had discovered: the falsified medical records, the stolen funds, the recorded confession. By 3 a.m., I had enough evidence to destroy them both, but I wanted more. I wanted them to reveal themselves completely. Thursday morning arrived gray and humid. Instead of driving to St. Mary's, I drove to Tom's office. At 7 a.m., exactly when I should have been checking in for surgery, I was sitting in a conference room with Tom, Dr. James Morrison, and Detective Patricia Walsh, from the Fairfield Police Department's Fraud Division. Patricia listened to the recording 3 times, her expression growing grimmer with each replay. "Mr. Hartford, this constitutes conspiracy to commit murder. We need to act immediately." "I agree," I said, "but I want them to think their plan is working. Can we proceed without alerting them initially?" She considered this. "What did you have in mind?" By 8 a.m., when I should have been unconscious on Michael's operating table, a carefully orchestrated plan was in motion. Tom called Saint, Mary's, speaking to Rebecca in his capacity as my attorney. Miss Hartford? This is Thomas Brennan. I'm calling about your father. There's been an incident. I could hear Rebecca's sharp intake of breath through the speakerphone. What kind of incident? He was supposed to be in surgery. He never arrived at the hospital. We found him at his home this morning, apparently having suffered some kind of episode. He's currently at Presbyterian General under psychiatric evaluation. Psychiatric evaluation? Rebecca's voice climbed with what sounded like genuine surprise mixed with calculation. What happened? He was found in his study around 5 a.m., extremely disoriented and making paranoid claims about people trying to kill him. The neighbors called 911 when they heard him shouting. Given his scheduled surgery and the concerning nature of his behavior, the attending physician ordered an involuntary hold. The silence on the other end stretched for several beats. Which physician? Dr. James Morrison. He's requesting family consultation. Can you and your husband come to Presbyterian immediately? We'll be there in 20 minutes. Tom hung up and looked at me. Think they'll take the bait? They have to, I said. This is exactly what they've been documenting. Mental deterioration requiring their intervention. They can't resist the opportunity. Presbyterian General had agreed to cooperate with the police investigation, providing a conference room where I could watch the proceedings through one-way glass. Detective Walsh had positioned recording equipment throughout the room, and 2 undercover officers were stationed as hospital orderlies in the hallway. Rebecca and Michael arrived at 8:47 a.m., their faces masks of professional concern hiding what must have been desperate calculation. They thought their plan had taken an unexpected turn, but one they could still manipulate to their advantage. Dr. Morrison met them in the consultation room, his expression grave. Thank you for coming. I'm afraid your father's condition is quite serious. What exactly happened? Michael asked, his surgeon's voice carrying just the right note of medical authority. According to the police report, Mr. Hartford barricaded himself in his study around 4 a.m., claiming his family was trying to murder him. He was found with what appeared to be surveillance equipment and pages of paranoid writings about conspiracies against his life. Rebecca and Michael exchanged a look I knew well, the silent communication of conspirators adjusting their strategy. This isn't entirely unexpected, Rebecca said carefully. We've been documenting cognitive decline for the past year. Dad's been showing increasing signs of paranoia and confusion. I've reviewed his medical files from St. Mary's, Dr. Morrison said. Your assessments are concerning. However, I'd like to understand more about these specific delusions. Has he mentioned fears about his safety before? Michael leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. There have been incidents. Accusations that board members were trying to force him out, claims that employees were stealing from him. We've tried to manage it quietly to protect his dignity and the company's reputation. The lies flowed so smoothly, I almost admired their skill. They were building on their fabricated foundation, adding layers that would support an immediate competency hearing. What's your professional opinion, Doctor? Morrison, Rebecca asked. As both his daughter and a healthcare administrator, I'm deeply concerned about his ability to make decisions. That's what we need to determine. Given the severity of his paranoid delusions and the potential danger to himself or others, I'm recommending a 72-hour psychiatric hold for comprehensive evaluation. That seems appropriate, Michael agreed quickly. Too quickly. As his physician, I fully support that recommendation. Perhaps we should also discuss power of attorney arrangements, given the circumstances. There it was. Even with their surgical plan derailed, they were pivoting to their backup strategy. Have me declared incompetent and seize control of everything. Actually, Dr. Morrison said, there's something else we need to discuss. Mr. Hartford made some very specific allegations about you both. He claims you were planning to murder him during surgery." Rebecca's laugh was perfectly pitched, concerned but not defensive. "That's exactly the kind of paranoid delusion we've been dealing with. He's convinced everyone's out to get him. Last month he accused his own accountant of embezzlement." "The mind can create elaborate conspiracies when it's deteriorating," Michael added with professional sympathy. "In my experience, patients often fixate on those closest to them. It's heartbreaking, but not uncommon." "He seemed quite convinced, Doctor," Morrison pressed. "He claims to have evidence." "Evidence of what?" Rebecca's voice sharpened slightly. "His own delusions." "He mentioned recordings, documents suggesting you've been planning to take over his company." Michael stood up, his expression shifting to indignation. "Doctor, are you seriously entertaining the paranoid fantasies of a man in psychiatric hold?" "My wife and I have done nothing but support Robert through his decline. To suggest otherwise is not just insulting, it's actionable." "No one's suggesting anything, Doctor," Morrison said calmly. "I'm simply trying to understand the full picture." "These are serious allegations." "They're the allegations of a sick man," Rebecca said firmly. "Dad needs help, not enablers who validate his paranoia. We should be focusing on getting him the treatment he needs, not indulging his delusions." "I agree," Dr. Morrison said. "That's why I'd like to review all the documentation you have regarding his mental state. Medical records, behavioral observations, anything that might help us understand the progression of his condition." Rebecca reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. "I anticipated you might need this. 14 months of documented incidents, medical evaluations, and witnessed behavioral changes." I watched her hand over the falsified evidence with the same confidence she'd shown discussing my murder. Every document in that folder was a lie, but she presented them like gospel truth. Dr. Morrison spent several minutes reviewing the papers while Rebecca and Michael sat in practiced patience. Finally, he looked up. "This is quite comprehensive. However, I notice all the medical evaluations were conducted by Dr. Thompson. No second opinions?" "Dad refused to see anyone else," Michael explained. "He trusts me, even in his paranoid state. It's been one of the few constants we could rely on." The irony of that statement made my fists clench behind the one-way glass. "I see, Doctor," Morrison said. "Well, given the severity of the situation and the documentation you've provided, I believe we need to proceed with formal competency proceedings. The psychiatric hold will give us time to conduct thorough evaluations." "What about the company?" Rebecca asked, trying not to sound too eager. "Hartford Medical Supplies can't function without leadership. The board is already concerned about stability." "That would be a matter for the courts to decide. But given your positions and family relationship, I imagine temporary conservatorship could be arranged fairly quickly." Michael and Rebecca exchanged another look, this one of barely concealed triumph. They thought they'd won. Their plan B was working perfectly. "We should see him," Rebecca said, playing the concerned daughter. "Even if he's paranoid about us, he needs to know we're here for him." "I'm not sure that's advisable in his current state, Doctor," Morrison said. "Please," Rebecca insisted. "He's still my father. Whatever his condition, he deserves to have family nearby." Dr. Morrison appeared to consider this. "All right, but I'll need to be present and security will be right outside." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Detective Walsh gave me a nod, and I prepared to face my would-be killers. The conference room they led them to had been carefully prepared. Hidden cameras captured every angle. Recording equipment documented every word. I sat at the table, doing my best to appear confused and frightened. Not entirely an act given what I'd discovered about my family. When Rebecca and Michael entered with Dr. Morrison, I let my eyes widen with fear. "Stay away from me," I said. my voice shaking. "I know what you're planning." "Dad," Rebecca said softly, approaching slowly like someone approaching a wounded animal. "It's okay. You're safe. We're here to help you." "You wanted me to die," I accused, pointing a trembling finger at Michael. "You were going to kill me in surgery." Michael's expression was pure compassion with just a hint of professional sadness. "Robert, I would never hurt you. Your family. These thoughts you're having, they're not real. They're symptoms of your condition." "I heard you talking," I insisted. "I have recordings." Rebecca sat down across from me, her eyes filled with crocodile tears. "Dad, there are no recordings. This is the paranoia doctor Morrison was talking about. Your mind is creating false memories, making you believe things that never happened." "The $28 million, I said. "You want the company." "You've been stealing from me." "Dad, you gave us signature authority on those accounts 6 months ago. Don't you remember? You said you were tired of dealing with the day-to-day finances. The gaslighting was masterful. If I hadn't had actual evidence, I might have doubted my own memory." "We love you," Michael said, sitting down beside Rebecca. "We only want what's best for you. That's why we think you need treatment. This paranoia, these delusions, they're destroying you." "You documented lies about me," I accused. "Told the board I was losing my mind." "We documented what we observed," Rebecca said gently. "The forgetfulness, the confusion, the angry outbursts. We did it to protect you, to ensure you got help when you were ready. I let them continue for another 10 minutes, each lie more elaborate than the last. They painted a picture of a devoted daughter and son-in-law, sacrificing their time and energy to care for an increasingly delusional patriarch. It was Oscar-worthy performance, except for one problem. Everything they said contradicted the recording I had of them planning my murder. Finally, I'd heard enough. I looked directly at Rebecca and spoke clearly. "I was in the waiting room on Monday. I heard every word you said about the surgery." The color drained from her face. Michael's hand tightened on the table. "What waiting room?" Rebecca asked, but her voice had changed. "Saint Mary's. You were in consultation room 3, talking on the phone about how Michael would adjust the anesthesia monitoring, about how complications during surgery would ensure I didn't survive." The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Morrison watched them carefully, noting every micro-expression. That's impossible," Rebecca stammered. "I wasn't even at the hospital on Monday." "Room 3, I repeated. "You were wearing your blue dress with the pearl buttons. You laughed when you said I actually believed you loved me." Michael stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. He's clearly having detailed delusions. We shouldn't be feeding into them." "Sit down, Doctor," Thompson, Detective Walsh said, entering the room with 2 uniformed officers. "You're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." The transformation was instantaneous. Rebecca's concerned daughter mask slipped, replaced by calculating desperation. Michael's professional composure cracked, revealing the cornered animal beneath. "You can't arrest us based on the ravings of a mentally ill old man," Michael protested. "We're not," Detective Walsh said, producing the recording device. "We're arresting you based on this recording of Rebecca Hartford discussing your plans to murder Robert Hartford during surgery, along with evidence of financial fraud, falsified medical records, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." I stood up, no longer playing the confused patient. "Every document you submitted to the board was a lie. Every medical evaluation you provided was falsified." Dr. Morrison confirmed I have no signs of dementia or mental decline. Rebecca stared at me with a mixture of shock and hatred. "You set us up." "No," I said quietly. "You revealed yourselves. I just made sure someone was listening." As the officers handcuffed them, Michael turned to me with desperate eyes. Robert, please. Think about what this will do to the family, to the business. The family? I laughed bitterly. You were planning to murder me. What family is that? Dad, Rebecca said, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl who used to wait for me to come home from work. We can work this out. It doesn't have to end like this. It ended the moment you decided my life was worth less than my money, I replied. They were led away in handcuffs, their carefully constructed plan in ruins. The local news would have a field day. Prominent hospital administrator and chief surgeon arrested for plotting to murder medical supply mogul. Their careers were over, their reputations destroyed, their freedom forfeit. But I took no satisfaction in their downfall. I sat in that conference room for an hour after they were gone, mourning the daughter I thought I'd raised and the son-in-law I'd trusted with my life. Literally, as it turned out. Tom found me there, still, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. The board's calling an emergency meeting, he said gently. They need to know what happened. What do I tell them? That my own daughter wanted me dead? You tell them the truth. That you uncovered a conspiracy and protected the company from criminals who happened to be family. The board meeting that afternoon was surreal. 12 people who'd known Rebecca since she was a child sat in stunned silence as I presented the evidence. The recording played through the boardroom speakers, Rebecca's voice discussing my planned death with the same efficiency she brought to quarterly reports. My God, Robert, said Jennifer Morrison, the longest-serving board member. How did you survive this? By remembering that trust should never blind us to truth, I replied. The vote was unanimous. Rebecca was immediately terminated from her position as hospital administrator. Michael's surgical privileges were revoked pending criminal proceedings. The $847,000 they'd stolen was frozen by court order. Over the next 3 months, the full scope of their conspiracy emerged. They'd been planning variations of this scheme for 2 years, originally hoping I'd die naturally, but growing impatient as I remained healthy. The falsified medical records went back 18 months. They'd even consulted with an estate attorney about challenging my will if I'd left too much to charity. The trial was swift. The recording was damning. The evidence overwhelming. Rebecca was sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and elder abuse. Michael got 18 years, with additional time for the medical fraud aspects. I was there for the sentencing, watching as they were led away in orange jumpsuits. Rebecca looked at me one last time, and I saw something that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just regret at getting caught. The company survived the scandal, actually thriving as competitors, and customers rallied around a business that had been targeted by such betrayal. I promoted Stuart Chen, my VP of Operations, who'd been with me for 20 years, to president. Someone I could trust, though I'd learned to verify everything now. I sold the big house Rebecca had grown up in, unable to walk its halls without remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. I bought a smaller place across town, modern and secure, with no memories attached. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Rebecca in prison. I held it for 3 days before opening it, afraid of what it might contain. Dad, it read, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that it wasn't always a lie. There was a time when I loved you as a daughter should love a father. Greed poisoned everything, turned me into someone I don't recognize. I'm sorry for what I became, for what I planned, for what I destroyed. I'm sorry I wasn't the daughter you deserved. I burned the letter. Some words come too late to matter. A year later, Hartford Medical Supplies merged with a national distributor in a deal worth $45 million. I donated half to establish the Hartford Foundation for Medical Ethics, focusing on integrity in healthcare. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. I'm 70 now, still healthy, despite my family's best efforts. I have dinner once a week with Tom Brennan and his wife. I play golf with Dr. Morrison, who's become a real friend. I've even started dating Margaret Walsh, a widow I met at a charity function. She jokes that she'd better not upset me since I have Detective Walsh on speed dial. But late at night, when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I still wonder how I missed it. How did I raise a daughter capable of planning my murder? Was it my fault for giving her too much, or not enough? Was Michael always a predator, or did Rebecca corrupt him? These questions have no answers, only echoes in empty rooms. The waiting room at St. Mary's has been renovated since that day. They moved Consultation Room 3 to a different wing. But sometimes when I drive past the hospital, I remember sitting in that chair, hearing my daughter plan my death, and I'm grateful for whatever instinct made me arrive early that day. Trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. But survival. That's something you can build on, one careful day at a time. People ask me if I regret having Rebecca, if I wish I'd never had children given how it turned out. The answer is complicated. I regret what she became, but not who she was. Somewhere in my memory is a 6-year-old girl with skinned knees and gap teeth, proudly showing me a picture she'd drawn of our family. "That's you, Daddy," she'd said, pointing to the tallest figure. "You're the strongest person in the whole world." That little girl was real, even if the woman she became was a stranger. I mourn them both, the daughter I lost to greed and the daughter I never really had. Hartford Medical Supplies is now part of National Medical Solutions. My name is still on some of the buildings, but I'm no longer involved in day-to-day operations. Stuart Chen runs things beautifully, with the kind of integrity I once thought I'd instilled in Rebecca. The Martha still comes by twice a week, though I tell her I can clean the smaller house myself. She insists on cooking enough meals to fill my freezer, muttering about bachelors who'd live on sandwiches if left unsupervised. She never mentions Rebecca anymore, though I know she testified at the trial about the fake medical incidents Rebecca had claimed to witness. Michael's medical license was permanently revoked. Last I heard, he was teaching anatomy to prisoners, part of an education program in the federal system. There's poetry in that, I suppose. The surgeon who planned murder now teaching others about the body he once swore to heal. The emergency board meeting that saved my company also changed its culture. We implemented new oversight procedures, psychological evaluations for senior positions, and mandatory ethics training that goes far beyond standard corporate requirements. Every new hire learns about what happened, not the details, but the lesson. That proximity to power can corrupt, that family doesn't guarantee loyalty, and that vigilance is the price of trust. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that phone call. Would I have gone into surgery, trusting the man who'd sworn to do no harm? Would I have survived Michael's minor adjustments to the anesthesia? Would Rebecca have cried convincingly at my funeral while mentally calculating her inheritance? These thoughts used to keep me awake. Now they're just shadows, reminders of a road not taken. I've started a support group for elderly victims of family financial abuse. We meet monthly at the community center, sharing stories that would break your heart. The retired teacher whose son convinced her to sign over her house. The widower whose daughter-in-law slowly drained his savings. We're a club no one wants to join, bound by betrayal from those we should have been able to trust most. The hardest part, one member said recently, is not the money. It's realizing that love was just a performance, that every hug had a price tag attached. I understood completely. Detective Walsh retired last year, but she still calls occasionally to check in. She told me Rebecca's case changed how they handle elder abuse investigations. They now look more carefully at family dynamics, especially when successful seniors suddenly show signs of mental decline. "Your case was a wake-up call," she said. How many other Robert Hartfords are out there, being gaslighted by their own families? Too many, I suspect. Far too many. The Hartford Foundation has funded 3 medical ethics chairs at universities across the state. Young doctors now study cases like mine, learning that the oath to do no harm extends beyond the operating room. One professor told me they use Michael's case as an example of how medical knowledge can be weaponized against vulnerable patients. It's a powerful teaching tool, he said. Students never forget that a medical degree doesn't guarantee moral character. I've been asked to write a book about my experience. Publishers think there's a market for survival stories, especially ones involving family betrayal. But some stories are too personal to sell, too painful to relive for profit. This testimony, given freely to those who need to hear it, is enough. Margaret Walsh, the woman I'm dating, not the detective, has 3 children who adore her. Watching them interact at family dinners shows me what I missed, what Rebecca and I never really had. There's genuine warmth there, unpracticed and unconditional. Her son actually turned down a promotion that would have taken him across the country because he didn't want to be far from his aging mother. "How do you know it's real?" I asked Margaret once. She looked at me with such sadness. "Oh, Robert. The fact that you have to ask breaks my heart." Next month marks 3 years since the surgery that never happened. St. Mary's invited me to speak at their Medical Ethics Symposium. The invitation was signed by the new chief of surgery, a woman who apparently uses Michael's case as a cautionary tale for residents. I haven't decided if I'll go. Part of me wants to stand in that hospital and reclaim it from the memory of betrayal. Another part never wants to see those walls again. The trust fund I'd established for Rebecca's future children has been redirected to nursing scholarships. Somewhere out there, young nurses are starting careers funded by money that was meant for grandchildren I'll never have. It seems fitting, investing in strangers who chose healing over harm. My will is different now. The bulk of my estate goes to charity, with specific provisions that make it ironclad. Tom Brennan made sure there are no loopholes, no ways for distant relatives to suddenly appear with claims of affection. "It's bulletproof," he assured me. "Your money will do good long after you're gone." That's all any of us can hope for, really. That something good comes from our pain. The gallery of family photos that once lined my hallway has been replaced with landscapes from my travels. Mountains and oceans and sunsets that demand nothing and betray no one. Visitors sometimes ask about family pictures, and I tell them I prefer to focus on the present rather than the past. Only Tom knows that I keep one photo in my desk drawer, Rebecca at 5 years old, missing her front teeth, holding a Father's Day card she'd made from construction paper. "To the best daddy ever," it reads in crooked crayon. That little girl loved me without calculation, without agenda. She was real in a way her adult self never was. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers making that card, if prison gives her time to think about the father she tried to kill. I'll never ask. Some bridges, once burned, leave nothing but ash and memory. The trial had revealed other details that still haunt me. Text messages between Rebecca and Michael, planning their future with my money. "We'll buy that practice in Scottsdale," Michael had written. "Finally live the life we deserve." The life they deserved. As if 40 years of my work was simply their entitlement, waiting to be claimed. They'd even discussed what to tell people about my death. "Complications during routine surgery," Rebecca had suggested. "Happens more often than people think with elderly patients. Everyone will be sympathetic. Elderly." At 68, I was still running a company, still sharp enough to catch their conspiracy. But to them, I was already a relic, an obstacle to their deserved inheritance. The prosecutor had asked me during trial preparation if I wanted to pursue the maximum sentence. "They plan to murder you, Mr. Hartford. We can push for life imprisonment." I thought about it for 3 days. Part of me wanted them to rot in prison forever, payment for the ultimate betrayal. But another part, the part that remembered teaching Rebecca to ride a bike, couldn't seek that level of vengeance. 15 to 20 years, I'd said, enough to ruin their lives, not enough to destroy any chance of redemption. The prosecutor thought I was too lenient. Tom thought I was too kind. Maybe they were right, but mercy, even undeserved, says more about the giver than the receiver. Stuart Chen invited me to the company Christmas party last year. I attended, shaking hands with employees who looked at me with a mixture of respect and pity. The victim who survived. The father who lost everything that mattered while keeping everything that didn't. "You look good, Mr. Hartford," said Janet from accounting, who'd worked there for 15 years. "Retirement seems to agree with you." I smiled and agreed, not mentioning the therapy sessions, the sleepless nights, the moment of panic every time I need medical care. Some wounds aren't visible in holiday party lighting. Dr. Morrison became my primary physician after everything happened. He jokes that I'm his most suspicious patient, always asking for second opinions, always questioning medication changes. He doesn't blame me. Trust issues are a logical response to attempted murder by your healthcare providers, he said during my last checkup. The fact that you trust anyone in the medical field shows remarkable resilience. Resilience, that's what everyone calls it. I call it necessity. You either adapt or dissolve. Margaret Walsh has been patient with my quirks. She understands why I won't eat food I haven't seen prepared, why I record important conversations, why I had Tom review our prenuptial agreement 3 times before I'd sign it. "I'm not after your money, Robert," she said gently. "I have my own. I'm after whatever time we have left, whatever happiness we can build." Time and happiness. Once I thought I had both with Rebecca. Now I know they're earned daily, not inherited or assumed. The prison sends me Rebecca's visitor request forms every 6 months. She's allowed to petition for family visits. I never respond, and she keeps sending them. Hope or manipulation? With her, I'll never know the difference. Michael's mother wrote me once, a long, rambling letter about how I destroyed her son's life, how he'd been a good man before Rebecca corrupted him. I wanted to write back, to explain that good men don't adjust anesthesia to commit murder. But what was the point? She needed her delusions more than I needed vindication. The house is quiet on Sunday mornings. I make coffee in the kitchen, overlooking the garden Margaret helped me plant. Sometimes a cardinal sits on the fence, bright red against the green, and I think about Rebecca at 7, excited because she'd seen her first cardinal. "It's so pretty, Daddy. Can we keep it?" "Wild things can't be kept, sweetheart. We can only appreciate them while they visit." She'd pouted but understood, watching the bird until it flew away. Now she's the one caged, and I'm the one who's learned that some wild things are dangerous to keep close. Tom retired last month, but not before ensuring every legal protection possible was in place. His successor, a sharp young woman named Patricia Kim, reviews my estate quarterly, checking for any signs of manipulation or undue influence. "Mr. Brennan trained me well," she said at our first meeting. "He made me study your case for a month. I know every trick someone might try. Every trick. As if attempting to murder your father for inheritance was just another legal maneuver." The medical equipment industry has changed dramatically in 3 years. Digital innovations, AI-assisted diagnostics, robotic surgery systems. Sometimes Stuart calls to ask my opinion on new directions, and I realize how far removed I've become from the empire I built. "You could come back," he suggested once. "The board would approve it instantly." But I can't. Every spreadsheet would remind me of Rebecca documenting my supposed decline. Every board meeting would echo with her voice planning my death. Some places become poisoned by memory. Instead, I consult occasionally for startups, young entrepreneurs who want to learn from someone who built something from nothing. I never mention Rebecca or Michael, but I always emphasize the importance of choosing trustworthy partners. The most dangerous betrayal, I tell them, comes from those you'd never suspect. They nod and take notes, probably thinking I'm paranoid. Let them learn their own lessons. Some wisdom can't be taught, only earned through survival. Last week I received notice that Rebecca had completed a prison education program, earning certification in medical billing. The irony was suffocating. The woman who'd tried to kill me for my medical supply fortune now processing insurance claims for the prison hospital. It's a good sign, her lawyer wrote in an accompanying note. She's showing rehabilitation, acceptance of responsibility. I threw the letter away. Rehabilitation suggests there was something good to return to. With Rebecca, I'm no longer sure there ever was. Margaret and I are planning a cruise to Alaska next month. She's never been, and I haven't traveled since before the conspiracy. We joke about checking our cabin for hidden recording devices, about having our food tested, but underneath the humor is real caution. We're quite a pair, she said last night over dinner. Two old people who've learned to look over our shoulders. Better than being two old people who didn't look, I replied. She squeezed my hand, understanding without explanation. That's the gift of late-life romance. No one needs their damage explained. We all carry our scars forward. The detective who replaced Patricia Walsh called yesterday. They're using my case in training materials, teaching new investigators how family financial abuse can escalate to attempted murder. Would you consider speaking to a class? She asked. Your perspective would be invaluable. I agreed. If my story prevents one elderly parent from being murdered by their children, then the pain has purpose. Stewart tells me Hartford Medical Supplies, now part of National Medical Solutions, still uses my picture in the lobby. The founder, the plaque reads. Nothing about the conspiracy, the trial, the betrayal. Just an old photograph of a younger man who thought he was building a legacy for his family. In a way, he was. Just not the legacy he'd imagined. The sunrise is beautiful this morning, painting the mountains gold and pink. I sit on my deck with coffee and silence, no longer waiting for phone calls that won't come, no longer hoping for reconciliation that can't happen. Survival, I've learned, isn't about winning. It's about continuing despite the losses, building something new in the ruins of what was destroyed. It's about learning to trust carefully while living fully. About accepting that some wounds never heal but don't have to define you. Rebecca will be eligible for parole in 12 years. She'll be 55, still young enough to build a new life. I'll be 82 if I'm still alive. Sometimes I wonder if she'll try to contact me, if she'll show up at my door with apologies and tears. I've instructed Patricia Kim to send a cease and desist order if she tries. Some doors once closed must stay that way for everyone's protection. Michael gets out 3 years after Rebecca. I doubt they'll reunite. Conspirators rarely survive the collapse of their conspiracy. They'll blame each other for the failure, for the exposure, for the consequences. That's the thing about partnerships built on greed. They dissolve when the money disappears. The garden is thriving now. Tomatoes and peppers and herbs Margaret insists will taste better than store-bought. She's probably right. Things you grow yourself, with your own hands and honest effort, usually do taste better than things you try to steal. You should write that book, she said again last night. Not for money, but for others who need to know they're not alone. Maybe I will. Maybe sharing the story beyond support groups and training seminars could help someone else recognize the signs before it's too late. Or maybe this testimony, given here and now, is enough. The coffee's getting cold, and Margaret will be up soon. She likes to work in the garden before the day gets too hot, humming old songs I half remember from better times. She's teaching me to trust again, not completely. That's gone forever. But enough to accept that some people are exactly who they appear to be. That's the real tragedy of Rebecca's betrayal. Not the attempted murder or the stolen money or the public humiliation. It's that she's made me suspicious of genuine kindness, made me question every gesture of affection, made me wonder if everyone has a hidden agenda. But I'm learning slowly to separate paranoia from prudence, to distinguish between healthy caution and destructive isolation. Margaret helps with that, patient with my need to verify, understanding when I double-check things that shouldn't need checking. Trust, but verify, she says, quoting Reagan with a smile. Nothing wrong with that. The Hartford Foundation approved another grant yesterday, funding a program that teaches elderly people to recognize signs of family financial abuse. The program director, a woman whose own mother was victimized by a grandson, sent me a thank you note. "You've turned your pain into protection for others," she wrote. "That's the definition of grace." Grace. Such a small word for such a large concept. I'm not sure I've achieved it, but I'm trying. The sun is fully up now, warming the deck, chasing away shadows both literal and metaphorical. Somewhere Rebecca is probably starting her prison work shift, processing medical claims in a bitter irony she may or may not appreciate. Somewhere, Michael is teaching anatomy to inmates, his surgeon's hands reduced to pointing at diagrams. And here, on this deck overlooking mountains that have stood for millions of years, I'm learning that survival isn't about forgetting the past or forgiving the unforgivable. It's about choosing to continue, to build, to trust carefully and love cautiously, despite knowing how much it can cost. The coffee cup is empty now, but the day is full of possibility. Margaret's stirring inside, probably ready to tackle those tomatoes. Tom's golf invitation for Thursday sits on the counter. Life, the one Rebecca and Michael tried to steal, continues. That's my revenge, my vindication, my victory. I'm still here, still building, still choosing hope over bitterness. They tried to kill me for money, but I've discovered something worth more than any inheritance. The knowledge that I can survive betrayal without becoming what betrayed me. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.